let a player do that. I do think they're going to have to consider whether they should trade him. I just don't see that happening soon.
Keyshawn J. Will Zubin, presented by Progressive Insurance. All guests join us on the Goodyear Hotline. And yes, the Aaron Rodgers saga continues, and you expect it will. And that was an interesting reference to Jordan Pippen and Jerry Krause, and we all learned about that in The Last Dance, comparing
but they
to
won
Brian.
6 championships, though. That carries a lot more weight when you're Jerry Krause than, Aaron Rodgers winning 1.
Yeah, Krause could say, "I built this,"
yes.
right? Like that. That's
when did they try to get rid of Jerry Krause? After the 5th championship, it's like
no, pretty much the whole time.
Yeah,
I know they were clowning him a lot and doing that sort of stuff, but were they really trying to just get rid of him?
Key, some of the stories I heard from Jerry, like playing for the Bulls and Jerry and I were close, like around the second title
was when it
started to happen.
Yeah, remember also when the Dream Team
They used to mess with him
so bad.
They were bringing in.
I feel so bad for him, man.
Who?
Jerry Krause, the way they used to do him, though.
MJ was relentless with that too.
But see, to me when I looked at that, and I know
that was go ahead.
No, I was gonna say when I looked at that, that was fun nature to me.
Yeah.
The way that they were treating it, it was like it wasn't. I didn't look at it as so mean spirited
because you're built like a lion. Like a lot of people aren't built like lions, where they can take that kind of.
Ribbing.
Yeah, constantly, right? Yeah. Like for some people, if they don't start fighting back, they just start becoming a little bit demeaning and a little bit demure in their whole response. So,
well, see, that's the thing with that, right? Because it could look like abuse, but it could be good-natured ribbing.
I thought that's what it was. But I could be wrong.
Does that reach that point of it's too much? Now, again, with Brian Gutekunst and Aaron Rodgers, that's the story we don't know enough about, but it's certainly starting to become one versus the other. It seems like that's really the heart of the issue with Aaron Rodgers. So Terry Bradshaw in a radio interview, he actually ripped Aaron Rodgers. He went against him and really called him out for being soft, which that was pretty aggressive. But
used the word weak.
Yeah,
he's weak.
Yeah, like the fact that he just, almost saying shut up and play. Just play. Why do you care who they draft? It shouldn't matter to you. It doesn't matter. You show up and you just compete. It's your job, all that stuff. He took that aggressive approach. Brett Favre, though, had a really interesting take on really what's going on the inside and maybe even what Aaron Rodgers could be thinking. This is on the Bowling with Favre podcast. Take a listen to what he said about Aaron Rodgers in that situation in Green Bay.
Knowing Aaron, and I think I know him fairly well. If he has a grudge, whether it be against the organization or a player or an arch rival or a family, friends, he ain't budging. I don't see him coming back and saying, if this is not resolved, however, whatever the issue is, if it's not resolved, or even if it's resolved, but he feels like they got one up on him, he ain't going to play.
I don't know how you resolve it, though.
Let's call this Straight Talk, brought to you by Straight Talk Wireless, by the way. That's an interesting take. It's almost like it's almost suggested, let's say you fire Gutekunst. Say, okay, well, if you're having a problem with him, he's out. We'll bring in a different GM. We'll bring in a different type of leadership, and, we want to make you happy. But what Favre is kind of suggesting is it's too late. Doesn't matter. Because it'll look like now that he had a power play, or he'll still look like the bad guy here. It's too late now.
It would look like that, and it probably is too late. Because when you're in a situation and you continue to keep asking for certain things, and you want a certain level of respect because you think you're giving the respect to the front office, and they're not giving it back to you, you feel a certain way. Brett Favre also mentioned his family and other things, and it's well documented that Aaron Rodgers allegedly has some issues with his family, and he doesn't deal with his family. So when you start to dive deep into those sort of things, I can certainly see how Aaron Rodgers feels about the way that he's treated the Green Bay Packers. Now, all of a sudden, they want to extend an olive branch to make everything all good. It's like, you know what, man, never mind. I'm the same way. When I'm done with you, I'm done with you. It doesn't – when you become somewhat of a snake somewhat untrustworthy. I almost use some words, but I can't mess with you. I can't even. I may never say why. I'll let you figure it out on your own. And I think Aaron Rodgers is the same way. You'll figure it out. You'll know why I feel the way I feel. I don't need to tell you.
But Jay, don't they have to fire them? Why wouldn't you then just make the decision? Fire Mark Murphy. If you fire Gutekunst and then you look at Aaron Rodgers and say, "We removed the problem. This won't happen again."
How do you know that Mark Murphy and Brian haven't been in lock and step this whole time?
Well, then they're both the problem.
But there's no ownership group here to remove those guys. But how do we don't know that they're not lock and step together. And I agree with Key on the player side. That's definitely how I would see it as a player side. Devil's advocate, though, if I put on my owner's cap, look, I disagree with a lot of things Terry Bradshaw has said, especially the weak part. Like that made me yesterday, when I put that in the text thread, I was like, that pissed me off. I was angry about it. I would never call somebody weak. A guy like Aaron Rodgers is not weak. Stop. The one thing I do agree with Terry Bradshaw on is the ownership cap is like, okay, if you want to retire, retire. You're not playing for anybody else other than the Green Bay Packers. I'm not releasing
you, right?
I am not releasing you. As a businessman, you are the face of my franchise. I understand we had some hiccups communication-wise. We have acknowledged that. We have said we are sorry for that. We have tried in multiple attempts at visiting you and talking things through. We can't meet middle ground. I'm not going to let you go somewhere else. We will do a rebuild. Aaron Rodgers has an ego. So do the executives of this franchise.
But now you're being spiteful, and that's bad for business. What do you tell your fan base? We're going to take the best quarterback in the world, and he's not going to play. He doesn't want to play, and we're not going to trade him and get assets so we can get better. Instead, we're going to have this hard-headed stalemate, and the losers are you, the fans, who, by the way, not only pay tickets, but a lot of them are part owners.
You know, whether they don't have a traditional owner, right?
And that's a huge part of the story that I'm talking about.
It's a different situation in Green Bay, but for me, and I've seen it for a very long time in many leagues, and I'll go to it again. The player's going to win in the end. The player always wins in the end. They always win in the end. And he can play, they can't. He can satisfy the fans, they can't. I don't care who you say. You can look at Carson Palmer. Eventually, Carson Palmer won. You can look at Trent Williams, the big left tackle that's now the highest paid guy in the San Francisco 49ers. He won with the Washington football team.
But let's take a player at this level,
I disagree
this
with
caliber
that.
of a player.
Always win.
Superstar.
Always win. James Harden, he won. He won because eventually, much like you say, spite. My job in ass is on the line.
Yep.
I am not going to get fired trying to rebuild a team that just went to 2 straight NFC championship games and a player so away from going to a Super Bowl.
And I can get a team that's willing to give me anything for him.
I'm not doing that.
I might
You'll
have to
fired.
do that if he's not going to play.
You got to think about your little kids.
I understand.
And your wife. When your wife come home and says to you, or you come home and your wife says to you, Jay, what are you guys doing?
But if there's no ownership group to remove them, what happens if they all say, you know what?
But
we're gonna go with Jordan Love, or we're gonna go to a rebuild.
But I think it's not an ownership group.
But you said the player always I disagree with that.
Always wins.
Football will always win. The NFL will always win.
Absolutely.
Fans might be angry about the fact that Aaron Rodgers isn't there and they're paying. It's not going to stop fans from going to games.
But Jay,
is it going to stop fans from going to games, Key?
No, but Jay, when I say the player always win, if Aaron Rodgers, which he allegedly said, he doesn't want to play for them, at some point in time, they've got to move on from Aaron Rodgers. They cannot sit there and say, well, we're just going to sit on you. Retire if you want to. You know how many times people have said that? You just might as well retire and say, yes, I'm going to retire and I'll stay home and I'll beat 350 pounds and I'll come in and then you'll figure it out. You're going to devalue the asset and completely ruin the franchise by being spiteful.
Yeah, no,
you can't do that.
Yeah, that's the dangerous part. And of course, that's the business